The topic of my talk is about assassination, or call it the execution of CIOs' careers, particularly in the public sector. Over the last few years, I have noticed a very significant uh, phenomena. We have witnessed the demise of numerous seasoned CIOs and the demise of their careers, particularly in Canada. And my talk today is really looking at perhaps an explanation of the why and how this is happening. This is somewhat unusual in the Canadian IT landscape, because for many years these CIOs have played a key role, particularly in the public sector. So it's quite clear to me that these CIOs has had significant amount of experience. They worked for many years promoting their individual IT shops in their field, and they were promoting IT in their respective government organization. So I think it's worthwhile to ask the question, why are the careers of these CIOs so summarily executed by their employer? And in order to respond to this question, this troubling question, I met with a number of them, and I'll share with you some of the stories without, of course, mentioning their names, because for privacy purposes. So, but it's still worthwhile to consider the reasons. I also discussed this matter with a number of colleagues that we meet from time to time, and we came with a number of theories that I'm going to share with you here as to why we think the career of these CIOs as a phenomena, why these careers are being executed. So let me start with the first one. The IT field is relatively young field, and the IT director or the CIO in most government agencies seem to report to a corporate commissioner of some kind, someone who is responsible for various areas of government operations, including IT. These people seem to usually come from traditional areas, established disciplines such as finance or HR, and so on. The changing nature of IT usually means that a lot of these commissioners, corporate commissioners, would become uncomfortable with this ever-changing IT environment, and I think to a certain extent even uncomfortable with the discipline itself. They're used to their established discipline, and IT, since their organization or their department is responsible for it. And for many of these, particularly finance commissioners, they would tend to view the IT for the most part as strictly a data processing function, technology function, uh, and as a cost center function, basically. So when a CIO or a director of IT attempt to establish his or herself and redefine that role in an expanded format beyond the data processing, what role, what need there is that the organization has, and the growing scope and the growing need of the organization for this ever-changing need, ever-changing definition of IT. There's always a conflict between the IT director, the CIO, and the commissioner involved. On the most part, corporate commissioners, as I said, particularly those coming from finance, would look at it as a cost center. How do you control the costs? And they also note that this cost center keeps to be growing. The cost of it, the cost of running that operation goes up, and it demands more and more capital and operating resources. And so it's viewed negatively, usually, by the corporate commissioner. This, in spite of the fact that these corporate commissioners understand the corporate overall needs and increased demand for computing of the corporation as a whole. But still, since IT tends to be one of their functions, they tend to look at only its scope and its influence. If IT was to be as a function provided corporate-wide, it probably wouldn't have the same perception, negative or otherwise, and nevertheless, in the public sector, this does not seem to be the case. A second point is that the reason for the termination of many of these public sector CIOs is that the corporate commissioners especially those that come new to the public administration, tend to have a preconceived notion of what they want in their CIOs or IT directors. And in more cases than not, they have also ideas about who they want to bring with them to the organization as they join the new corporation. So, as a result, they tend to want to replace the CIO. A parallel point to this is that these corporate commissioners look at the scale of the IT function itself within their department, and they quickly realize how important that function it is, and how a large portion of their operation depends on the IT function. So these two factors together, especially the size of the IT function in their corporate commission, they want to depend on an individual of their choice rather than somebody they inherit when they join the new organization. And that's understandable, except that it comes at the cost of the career of the seasoned CIO that was already there. A fourth reason for this phenomena, and I argued with my colleagues about this, is the age of the seasoned CIO. It appears that age seemed to play a factor. Many of these seasoned CIOs have been there, and but more importantly, uh, they are perceived as old-timers, which is kind of interesting given the rapidly changing nature of the IT function. So this long history and experience of the CIO is viewed uh, not as positively on its own merit, i.e., somebody who's seasoned, but that it's an obstacle for change, and and that could very well be the case. But one wonders why that would be the case, given the youth of the IT profession, the young age of the IT profession, relative to those conventional um, disciplines. This would never be used against finance commissioners or HR commissioners who have age on their side. On the contrary, they would be considered to be a very seasoned and distinguished careers. So how you can reverse that when it applies to IT is really fascinating. You see, from my perspective, the changing nature of IT implies that the CIO has to stick around for a long time in order to be able to keep up with the ever-changing mandate of the position, contrary to the other professions in finance and HR, where it tends to be fairly static, fairly well-defined. It isn't significantly processes and chart of accounts and HR hirings don't seem to be really such a rapid change, almost 180 degrees within a decade, like it happens in the IT profession. So, what else? I would say that the lack of understanding of some of the corporate commissioners of the actual mandate and discipline of IT is a major stumbling block, and they they tend to want to view it not as a corollary to their main discipline and activities, but as a competition, um, especially when uh, the CIO function tends to become much more rampant and much more exposed to many of the corporate programs, even more than the corporate commissioner. So as a result, I would say that uh, the interdependence of the IT field with the overall corporate uh, agenda becomes a threat for some of these corporate commissioners. Add to that also the fact that many corporate commissioners have difficulty really understanding the IT lingo. Uh, and this is changing, of course, but it's still considered to be a foreign territory. So, um, I think I've covered uh, most of the rhymes and reasons for this phenomena of terminating careers of CIOs in the public sector. I would conclude that with an observation that uh, many government agencies in Canada tend to marginalize IT and render it to a very back-end operation, a cost center operation, and not at the forefront of decision making, nor in terms of it is significant impact on the directions of the organization as a whole. What is also happening in the public sector is is more and more concentration of the main functions of corporations into fewer and fewer departments. So there are fewer commissioners responsible for more and more areas, and of course that in essence marginalizes IT even more, and in more cases than not, it would tend to make the IT shop as an island that has little chance of exercising any influence on the overall corporate strategic directions. So it is clear to me that what we noticed a couple decades ago, when there was a crying need for CIOs to come and make change and bring innovation into organization, is now being reversed in the other direction of marginalizing IT. We're now seeing the opposite direction in many organizations. So for better or for worse, the role of the future municipal CIO is going to continue to decline, and it will be assisted by many other factors that I will discuss in another time, including cloud computing and so on, and mobile computing and many other changes that are happening. And unless CIOs are well equipped with survivor skills, I would say that the career of many of those public sector CIOs is limited and could very well be terminated, particularly by those corporate commissioners who want to see this function to go back to its original mandate of data processing and technology deployment, nothing more. So